What's going on, guys? In this video I wanted to go over SoFi Technologies stock and the potential upside that I see in it. So we're going to look at the stock chart for SoFi, why it's beaten down recently, and then finally go over some price targets from analysts. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below, and if you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit the subscribe button. So let's start by looking at SoFi Technologies stock chart. So what you see today, the stock was down a little over 4%. Just in a single trading day. In the last 5 days, we're only down 0.33%. In the last month, we're down almost 35%. In 6 months, down almost 32%. Year to date, we're up a little bit at 23%. So overall, SoFi Technologies kind of has shown weakness very much recently. But what you'll see is the stock only IPO'd basically a year ago. And what you've kind of seen over that time frame is a run up in the stock price and then a pullback, a run up, pullback, run up, pullback. And this is very common with IPOs. So basically you have a lot of the kind of angel investors who started investing before the stock was even public. And basically they're always looking for new opportunities. So when a stock IPOs, generally they kind of liquidate at least some of their shares and kind of reallocate that money to higher potential opportunities, startups and things like that. So you're seeing kind of in here some of that play out where the stock runs up, it kind of hits where a lot of these investors are looking to take profits, and then it kind of pulls back. And we'll actually touch on some of the news recently that you're seeing here and basically accounting for this drop. So the biggest thing to kind of note here is the stock is kind of at its low point. So you can see back in here it went down to $15, and down in here it actually dropped down a little below $14. So we're approaching kind of its low point, which provides a good opportunity if it kind of follows this cycle to buy back in and then ride back up to the $22 range. And then if you want to sell out, then you could sell out. Otherwise, if you're a long-term holder, kind of like myself, and believe in the company long-term, then obviously you kind of want to just keep holding and let things kind of play out. So as I mentioned, I am a shareholder of this stock, and basically the kind of technique that I'm running on, or the strategy that I'm running on, is the wheel strategy. If you aren't familiar with it, I do have a video that I will link down below on the wheel strategy. Otherwise you can YouTube it, Google it, and you can find a lot of information. But it's basically selling puts under the stock when the stock hits a certain level, and then selling calls on the other end. So basically right now is a perfect opportunity. We've seen a lot of run down with the stock. It's a perfect opportunity to sell puts at a level where you're comfortable buying the stock. So personally, I think the $14 mark is very attractive. Even $14.50 is not a bad mark. And you can collect a decent amount of premium just to sell those puts. So it lowers your cost basis, and it's basically a good strategy to utilize on a stock like this. But anyways, what I'd really like to look at is the revenue here. So the revenue, they're seeing huge growth. So they're at 34% year over year. And this is even coming off a year in 2020 where obviously we saw a lot of growth in interest in the stock market. So everyone was kind of interested in getting into the market, and SoFi capitalized on that last year, but they're still capitalizing on that growth. And that's what's very interesting with this company, because if we actually bounce back to December 2020, you see their revenue was actually up almost 170% year over year. So they are basically competing with numbers that are already inflated, and they're still seeing growth numbers that are huge. 35% is still a huge number. The issue kind of with this company that you're kind of seeing here is they are losing money. So overall, they aren't a money maker quite yet. This last quarter, they actually reported down 12 cents. But again, they surprised on revenue, which was a huge beat for them. And that's why the stock kind of ran up over the last month to that $23 range. And you're kind of seeing, previously they were reporting even lower numbers than that. So they're kind of trending in the right direction as far as earnings and revenue go. But there's still some work to do on basically the bottom line to get to profitability. Once they hit that though, the stock could easily explode up and run up quite fast and very quickly. So basically, why is the stock down, right? They reported great earnings, they're showing continued growth, and then they're working towards profitability. So why did the stock fall so much in November? And basically what happened, and this article touches on it and is kind of a good resource, is some of the major investors in the company, as I kind of mentioned, has been happening throughout the last year. They're selling out of the portions of their shares. So I'm not going to try and pronounce this guy's name, but I'm familiar with him. I've seen some of his videos. He's very kind of a big investor in a lot of startups, and what he's done over the last over November was he actually liquidated 15% of his stake in SoFi. So obviously that's a huge downward move, and not only that, but also the news that some of these bigger investors are getting out of the stock can kind of create some fear around the stock. So he still, though, is retaining 85% of his investment. So really what he's looking for is long term. He still believes in the company, but what they talk about here is that he's basically just trying to get some of the gains and some of the money out of the stock so that he can allocate it, as I previously mentioned, to other startup opportunities, and basically just stay diversified and keep more money in some of those startups. Because right, if you're investing in startups, you're gonna see a lot higher potential growth than having basically money in a lot of these common stocks where anyone can kind of trade them. Because right, when it's a startup company, you have a little bit more control over how the company actually performs, and also they have such small market caps that $1 million investment could turn into $10 million basically in a year, right? So it makes more sense for them to allocate their capital to some of these startups. And you've seen that with a lot of other companies. So they talk here also about Qatar Investments, Silver Lake Partners, SoftBank, Red Crow Capital. I'm not super familiar with them, but basically they sold a lot of shares, and that kind of allocated for 6% of the company's outstanding shares. So that accounts for a lot of the big drop recently in the stock. Is just basically people taking profit, trying to get out of the stock just because they're up on it and they see other opportunities with more potential. So just to touch a little on the stock, right? The SoFi actually provides student loans, personal loans, and home loans to consumers. So that's kind of the majority of their business, but they're also branched into a lot of different things. So they have SoFi Invest, which is a brokerage. They have cryptocurrency offerings. They have basically SoFi credit cards, everything that you can imagine. They're trying to basically become a one-stop shop for your personal finance. So anything that you can imagine, anything that you kind of want done in terms of finance, you can go to them and basically get taken care of. And what they're looking at and what they've kind of seen recently is huge growth numbers. So their users in the most recent quarter is up 113% to a little over basically 2.5 million members. They're sitting at around 2.6 million. And most recently, right, they've actually seen that a lot of their products are basically experiencing more growth than their member numbers. So what that in turn means is basically more of their members are actually, or their current members are actually using more of their products. So right, that's a huge sign, because basically it's indicating that the members that they do have like the app so much that they're actually using more products within SoFi Technologies. So that's a huge growth catalyst that'll help generate more revenue and basically overall help profitability in the long run. The other thing that's kind of been big and was evident in the most recent quarter is they've been generating more revenue. So over the first half of 2021, they've actually generated $427 million in revenue, which is up 121% year over year. So again, that is a huge number when compared to 2020, where you had a lot of people at home, a lot of people focusing on investments, a lot of growth in the stock market, cryptocurrency, things like that, where people were very focused on it, and you're still basically having that growth in 2021. And then they still talks a little bit about free cash flow, so they still have plenty of cash to kind of make acquisitions and do different things, which we'll actually touch on here next. is SoFi, the biggest thing that they're going to have, the biggest catalyst that you'll kind of see over the next year is they've submitted an application to become a bank holding company with the Federal Reserve, as well as looking at basically acquiring Golden Pacific Bank. So right now, the way the company works is they actually have to utilize third-party banks to deal with some of their money management because they're not a holding company with the Federal Reserve. So once they do that, right, they can cut their margins down basically, or basically the money that they're allocating and having to pay out to these third-party banks now goes straight back into the company's pocket because they can manage these things internally. So that is going to be a huge catalyst that can help the business basically grow over the next year. All right, so the last thing here that I always like to look at is where do analysts see the numbers kind of going? Where do they see the stock price ending up over the next year or so? So what we're seeing here, sadly, they don't have a ton of analysts covering this stock. So in total, they have 8. There's 5 that are currently saying buy, 1 overweight, and then 2 that are saying hold. Luckily, there's none that are saying underweight or to sell, but down here is kind of what I like to look at. So the highest analyst has a price target of $30. The medium analyst or median is sitting around 26, and then the lowest analyst has a price target of $19, which is still clearly above the current price, with an average of 25.43. So if we run those numbers real quick, we'll see that overall you have a good potential return kind of with this stock. So we're going to take 25.43 and we're going to subtract $15, which is the current stock price, and that gives us 10.43. And if we divide that by $15, that is basically the potential return that we would see if we bought the stock at $15. And that accounts to basically a 69.5% return. And this is kind of obviously, in my mind, conservative actually for the stock. I think it has a lot more potential to run up. I think once you see some of these, the continued growth, and then also with the acquisition of the bank that we just talked about and becoming a bank holding company with the Federal Reserve, I think you'll see more people get interested in the company, and I think you'll see basically higher profitability and higher revenue numbers all around. So overall, I think this is a positive stock. I think there's a lot of opportunity with it, and like I mentioned, I'm a shareholder. This is obviously not financial advice by any means, but take into consideration all the things kind of mentioned here. Do your own research, and if it's a stock that interests you, then put a little money in it and kind of see what happens over the next year. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.